everyone, Dan Electrum Charging Solutions. We're here at the Electric Vehicle Charging Technology Zone. We have a very special guest today, Tony Gioventu, Executive Director of the Condominium Homeowners Association. We're going to cover off, well, quite a few hot topics in terms of how strata councils consider and adopt and, of course, deploy electric vehicle charging into their given facilities. Kind
of a hot topic these days.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a big part of what we do, and we've got Tony in here today, and he's going to clarify and answer a lot of these questions, you know, misconceptions, gray areas. We're going to make it all crystal clear. So
we'll do our best.
Yeah, let's start it off. So the question sheet, we have it right here, and it's based on a collaboration of what Tony sees or gets asked, what we get asked. So it's going to get interesting. First one, do you think Strata should include plans for the deployment of electric vehicle charging infrastructure in their facility?
Well, I think every building and every community needs to look at the continual modernization of their systems. You know, at some point, upgrades are going to be essential. Even, you know, upgrades to electrical systems without charging stations are going to be essential. And it's a good opportunity to start modernizing your building. Charging stations, access to charging stations for vehicles, they reduce combustible vehicles in your parking garages, and they add value to your property. So it's a good opportunity at this time, especially with all of the incentives that are in the industry. It's a good time to take advantage of that.
Excellent. Next question, of course, as a percentage, do we see more owner tenants or strata councils initiating that process, or the process of potentially adopting electric vehicle charging?
It's a bit 50-50. We see some strata councils, especially in newer buildings, where there's more of a demand, we're finding, that are coming forward to their ownership and saying, okay, we need to identify a number of parking spaces, we want to put in stations, we've identified that there's a number of public incentives that we can get some grants for. The technology is now at the point where this is an easy installation and transformation. But the other side of it is owners will come forward. An owner will, you know, they're interested in buying an electric vehicle, or the worst case scenario is they bought an electric vehicle and now they pitch up at home and they're saying to their strata council, hey, I need to put in a charging station, and you know, not the right way to do this.
No, absolutely. We want to make sure we can, you know, that you could potentially get charging in at home, wherever that
absolutely
may be. Question most asked by strata councils when they're considering electric vehicle charging in the facility?
You know, everything is always the same for almost every topic in every strata corporation, and it's always about money. Yeah. Who's going to pay for this? And they're in strata corporations and strata councils, it's a genuine concern that they're faced with. But I think that they need to look at all of the incentives that are out there. There are incentives through BC Hydro, through the provincial government. Some of the municipalities have provided incentives. The incentives really go a long way to the cost of stations and installations. Every building's a little different. And so older buildings might not necessarily have enough capacity without doing major electrical upgrades, but in exchange for an owner requesting permission to put in a charging station, the strata corporation can agree to that under the condition that the owner agrees to pay for all the costs. And in some cases that may be a nominal cost with incentives, in other cases it could be very expensive, but you kind of need to go down that road a bit to find out what those cost implications are going to be. Then you can figure out who pays. The other side of the pay problem is who pays for the electricity that we end up using. And the legislation was intentionally amended last year so that now your strata corporation can adopt a rule or a bylaw that imposes a user fee both for the electrical service and for the maintenance and the operation of the stations. So you know, it's a user pay system, so why not do it?
Yep, and we'll get into more detail that in another segment, which kind of leads into this next question. So individual has either purchased or will be purchasing an electric vehicle. There's no charging in their building or in their facility. They want to present this to the strata council. What should they be doing in terms of that presentation to the strata council?
Make a request for a meeting with your strata council, a hearing if you need, but put everything in writing. Have a written communication of all of your conversations and follow up so that there's no chance of misunderstandings of what the expectation is going to be. Don't take a casual agreement from council as, yes, you know, go ahead and buy an electric vehicle. You want a written document that confirms, yes, we're going to put it into a station, yes, these are the locations, this is what what's going to happen. One of the challenges strata corporations have to figure out, and this is really not a problem, you just have to figure out how the dynamic works. Property is designated different in every building. So, you know, this parking space in my building might be common property, this parking space in your building might be limited common property, or it might have been assigned under a lease or by a developer as an assignment. You know, there could be different uses for property. We need to sort out the understanding, how is the property designated, how will the station be put in, who's going to pay for it, and then at the end of the project, who's going to own it, maintain and repair it.
Excellent. So let's assume now that an individual's made that has put forward a proposal. The Strata Council looks at this proposal and goes, yeah, we think this is going to benefit not only the individual, but perhaps the whole facility. How do they present that to the ownership?
Well, they might not have to go to the ownership. If it's simply an alteration that where the Strata Corporation hasn't made there isn't a significant change in use or appearance to the property, and you know, and a charging station that is an alteration to an electric service at the end of a parking spot might not be a significant alteration. If they've not made a significant alteration and the costs are being covered by the person installing it, so the Strata is not assuming the costs, there may not be a requirement to go to the owners. The council may have the authority to grant the permission for this to happen. What the council wants to do is they want to retain control of the process. The Strata Council needs to know that whoever is providing the electrical services and the installations is the contractor of the Strata Council, working for the Strata Corporation, because they have a duty to protect the infrastructure of the building. And so, you know, in that process, that's what they do. They may sometimes have to go to the ownership. For example, if the Strata wants to install 8 stations and they want to spend funds from the contingency funds on the upgrade, or if they're purchasing stations and the value of the stations is greater than $1,000, unless the bylaws have been amended, if they want to do that, they may also need to go to the owners for approval.
Okay.
Some things might require a 3/4 vote. For example, if they adopt a bylaw that regulates charging stations and costs and all of those things, it's a 3/4 vote.
That was going to be my next question, the 3/4 vote.
Yeah. So that would require a 3/4 vote. If they're going to be purchasing and doing upgrades that cost $25,000, that will require a 3/4 vote. If it's a significant change in use, if they've reallocated a number of parking spaces and changed the designation from, you know, general visitor or overflow parking to electric vehicle charging, that might be a significant change in the use of property.
Okay.
Again, requires a 3/4 vote. But for a conventional installation, the Strata can even adopt a simple rule that deals with charging stations and user fees, and that only needs to be ratified by a majority vote at their next meeting. So this is not complicated. I think people make this more complicated than it has to be. Yeah.
And I think it's just having the information, what we're doing today, these, you know, the resources for this type of information, it's important so that people understand this. But the next question is it's an interesting one, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions about this. Should the Strata Council maintain ownership of the charging infrastructure, and or should they own the electrical infrastructure that feeds the chargers, and then the tenant homeowner owns the charging station that goes on the wall?
Well, look at it this way. Once the charging station is installed in the building and attached to the wall, however it's installed, some of them are on the wall, some of them are on the floor. The moment that happens, those are becoming part of the building. They're part of the fixtures. Okay. And one of the things the Strata Council will want to ensure is that it is properly maintained, repaired, serviced, insured for damage, theft, liability, all of those types of things. That's the obligation of the Strata Corporation to figure that out. It's in the best interest of the Strata Corporation to probably manage, maintain, and repair them. Okay. The cost of that can be downloaded to the users, so that everybody's not responsible for that, just the people who are using them. But look at it this way. I sell my unit. We have a charging station. I'm not taking that charging station with me. It's part of the infrastructure of the building. Right? And so what happens with the next buyer? What happens with that charging station? Who's maintaining, repairing it? What if nobody's going to use that charging station as the next buyer? You know, so it's all of these details. They're things that you just need to work out in advance, so there are no misunderstandings.
We typically get, the response we typically get is, because obviously we follow what you're doing, but the typical response is, well, we don't want to be responsible for those chargers. We don't want anything to do with them. Right. You know, it's hands off. Just you take it, you deal with it. But in effect, what you're saying is, whether you like it or not, essentially, It's going on common property.
It's going on common property. There's public liability associated with them. There are risks. It's connected to your electrical system. There is no work involved other than
Agreed,
making sure that there's a maintenance user responsibility. They're virtually maintenance free.
Yeah.
It's in the best interest of the Strata Corporation to retain control over the installation of the electrical service and the operation.
Excellent. The last one, and it's a big one, right to charge.
Yeah, so that's the million-dollar question, right? 2 people want electric vehicles, 98 people don't want them, and so the 98 people don't approve what the 2 people want.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's as much about a right to charge as it is more, it's time to modernize your buildings. One of the components that's seriously ignored in Strata buildings are electrical services, electrical vaults, electrical capacity, maintenance. Electrical vaults and systems need to be maintained, repaired, and inspected on a routine basis, and they're not being done. Take the opportunity to put in some charging stations in your building as an opportunity to also look at possible upgrades, maintenance, repair, and renewals to your systems, and avoid a lot of future costs.
Yeah.
They'll be an additional asset for your building. It'll add more to your property value collectively.
And that's the big one.
And that's a benefit. If you only have a charging station on one spot for one person, probably not going to have a huge impact on the building. But if you have 6 stations that are open to the users to be able to use them, there's a benefit to that as well. So, no 2 stratas are the same. Everybody has to figure this out and whether it'll work. Some of the older buildings don't have capacity, and the upgrades for the electrical are really expensive for them.
Yeah.
You can see where it's probably not going to happen until the building goes through a major renewal.
Yeah, and that's the assessment that your provider does for you initially when you're considering doing
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But it isn't a right. The Strata Corporation doesn't have to agree, but why not take advantage of such a great opportunity?
Excellent. Well, there you have it, the first segment. The industry, from the mouth of the industry expert. Hope you found this informative. I know I did. Again, Tony, I think if people have, or if there's anything that we didn't cover today, where do we go? Where do they go?
Anyone can call one of our advisors and we can walk them through the process. Strata Council, owner, tenant, the property manager, anyone can call the office.
Yep.
We can walk them through the steps. We can provide you with a number of guides to help you through the steps and just get you on the right track so you get this done the right way.
Excellent. And we also have some of this information up on our website in our library segment. There's all kinds of documentation on Strata councils and how they adopt this stuff. And of course, you can always go to the CHOA website. Thank you very much. 2 more sessions coming up. This stuff's going to get really interesting. Don't forget to subscribe. And any comments below?
We'd love to hear your feedback on how your charging stations are working too.
Absolutely. You heard it.